What's up, everyone? We are back, and this time we are talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, one of my favorites. And the reason why I say they're one of my favorites is because of Joey Burrow. If you watched quarterback this season, you probably like Joe Burrow even more coming off that show. Guy is just a little, he's a little dorky, a little quirky. Um, but I believe in my heart of hearts and my mind of minds, I've been doing this for quite some time, that Joe Burrow is going to win a Super Bowl. It's just a matter of time. And the Cincinnati Bengals become a very interesting topic for me then because every year for the past few years, I have put at least a little sprinkle dinkle on the Bengals to win the Super Bowl because that's how relevant Joe Burrow makes this team. And we saw last season, again, a really bad start to their season, but they rallied at the end, almost made the playoffs. And, there's a lot of teams like the Kansas City Chiefs who got their ass beat in week 18 on purpose, who are probably very glad, or were probably glad, that the Bengals did not make the playoffs last season because they're dangerous. And they're always going to be dangerous as long as they have Joe Burrow. Let's talk a little bit about what they did last season, and then we'll get into our projections this season. Again, while I'm all about Joe Burrow, I'm not so sure about Zach Taylor. I'll talk about that a little bit too. Obviously, offensively, this probably is obvious to you as an NFL fan. The Bengals thrived offensively. Top three in most marks, especially the major ones, points and yards per game. Great on third down and in the red zone. But they were bottom third of the NFL on the ground. Now, this year, Chase Brown, last year he didn't get more than 15 carries in a game until November. So the team believes in him. They've said as much. We saw him kind of flash last season towards the end of the year, and he'll be more featured this year. And I think that's a good thing for the Bengals. Chase Brown is a good young athlete. He's a tough runner, and there's a lot of potential there for him to improve their run game. But last season, not very potent, but the Bengals were also playing from behind a lot because of how bad their defense was. So a little bit of that has to be thought of in the context of a bad defense and Joe Burrow always catching them up. Obviously, the mystique of Joe Burrow and what he can do from his second year in the NFL took his team to the Super Bowl, uh, and the best wide receivers at 1 and 2 probably in the NFL. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a better combination than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in this offseason. They signed Higgins until 2028 and Jamar until 2029. So that duo will be together for a while. They also have Mike Gesicki, very legitimate tight end. We saw that work wonders last year, especially at the goal line. Now, one area where they didn't do very well offensively, um, average to below average, they were 18th in sack rate allowed. And Burrow was hit plenty, second overall in the NFL among starters of hits taken to Joe Burrow, and hurried the fourth most in the NFL. So while that's an indictment on their offensive line, it's also just more proof in how brilliant Joe Burrow is, no matter what the situation is, right? He's consistently the best quarterback in the NFL against a blitz. The guy knows how to move in the pocket, knows how to keep his eyes downfield, knows how to make things happen no matter what the situation. And they did bring in a third round draft pick. I believe the guy was number 81 overall, Dylan Fairchild, to start. He's in the starting position on their depth chart now at left guard. And they bring back some guys who are now together for a season or two. So, this is an offensive line that can get better. And the way that I look at it is this is going to be a top offense in the NFL no matter what, as long as Joe Burrow is healthy. So really, it can only get better, right? Because their offensive line wasn't stellar last season, evident in the run game, evident in their pass protection. So if their offensive line gets any better, then imagine Joe Burrow with a second more per play in the pocket, right? This team goes from very dangerous to extremely dangerous. So I have no concerns about their offense, obviously, as long as everyone's healthy. Now, their defense took a major step down in 2024. They're very bad in the red zone, bottom three, poor against the pass, average against the run, and one of the worst in sack rate, that is, sacking the other quarterback. They were 26th overall. Most of the major moves that they made this offseason were on defense, and most notably signing Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, Al Golden, to replace longtime D coordinator Lou Anarumo. I was a Lou Anarumo fan. I like his style of coaching, but it did seem like maybe he was losing touch with some of these younger guys. Maybe he was kind of out of his element a little bit. Certainly brought very good defensive changes to the Bengals a few years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. Not so much anymore. So, when a defense is that bad, it makes sense to make substantial change, right? Al Golden was with the Bengals in 2020, then went to Notre Dame, has made Notre Dame one of the best defenses in the country. Last year, they allowed 15 and a half points per game. It's top 5, top 3 in yards allowed per game, top 10 in most categories, and maybe most impressively of all, number 1 in opponent completion percentage was Notre Dame last season. And that has to be a lot of Al Golden, right? They have a lot of talent, do the Irish, but I think this guy knows what he's doing. If he can create a situation here where the Cincinnati Bengals are an elite passing offense and an above average passing defense, now you are talking about very legitimate Super Bowl possibilities, right? Because they have the quarterback. If they have the defense, it's 1 + 1 = 2 in this league sometimes. Now, I brought up Zach Taylor because I'm just not sure about Zach Taylor. I liked how he handled himself in a really high level way in some crucial situations in the past. I remember when that whole thing happened with Damar Hamlin. He went down in the game. Zach Taylor and Sean McDermott had some conversations on the field. Just very classy, high character guy. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good football coach. But Joe Burrow, you see him getting in, not tiffs, but it seems like Zach Taylor is just kind of like a calmer personality. Joe Burrow is more that like Tom Brady gets fired up. That can work, right? But I'm not sure if Zach Taylor is making a substantial difference in a positive way. I think he's kind of even keel. So for my, I have coaching effectiveness ratings that I work into my power ratings. Zach Taylor is just average. And we'll see what happens this season. But they definitely have more talent. I think they have the right people in place from an administrative perspective. So really all Zach Taylor has to do is steer the ship. He did that really well a few seasons ago. Just kind of don't get in Burrow's way, right? And don't get in maybe Al Golden's way for the defense. So we'll see what happens. I think Zach Taylor is a high-level human. And a lot of times as a coach, that's one of the most important parts. But I'm not, as opposed to other coaches that I feel very strongly about, Zach Taylor, I don't feel strongly about him. But maybe he'll show us one way or the other how he handles this season. One thing to immediately look at, right, is how the Cincinnati Bengals start this season. Last season, I believe 0-3. The season before 0-2, they don't win right away. They need to win right away, and I'll get into that with their schedule here in a second. But that is very, very important. Between the draft and free agency, they completely rehabbed their linebacking crew, added young talent to their defensive line. They had the number 1 pick, or in the draft, I believe he was the number 18th or 19th pick, Shamar Stewart, defensive end. A lot of potential there. All the intangibles and intangibles to become a breakout star in the NFL. He adds to their pass rush. They also added free agent Oren Burks from Philly, who stands out on their linebacking crew. He was awesome in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl last season for the Eagles. So that's a really good pickup. Secondary, still the same. And again, big question mark if Al Golden's going to immediately translate. I think he will. Seems like the kind of guy that fits in well there. He's been there before. But they have a completely new linebacking crew, more depth on their defensive line. Of course, Trey Hendrickson still needs to be re-signed. Right now, he's showing up to camp. He's doing his part. Obviously, he's their best pass rusher. I think they keep him and they find a way to keep him around. They definitely should. But so this defense going through changes, hoping for the Bengals' sake that it's going to be positive. I feel like it is going to be more positive, but based on what we know from Al Golden, based on what we know from who they brought in, and you really can't get any worse, right? The secondary now, the same guys for the most part. So the secondary, They had some flashy moments last season, like you saw the talent, but ultimately they're one of the worst crews against the pass. But again, a lot of pressure on the secondary because of the lack of a pass rush there for Cincinnati as well. So in summation, tremendously high upside for Cincinnati, the highest of upside. Again, every year I put something on this team to win the Super Bowl. And I would say their schedule is medium hard, but they must win early. They start off at Cleveland, at home against Jacksonville, and at Minnesota. On paper, 3 winnable games, right? Especially if they're one of the elites in the NFL, which I think they always can be with Joe Burrow. But at Cleveland has been a problem for the Bengals. Just look at seasons past. It's a divisional opponent. It's week 1. Shit happens. Jacksonville is going to be better this year, I believe, with their new administration, Travis Hunter, etc. Minnesota, never an easy out. Kevin O'Connell at the, as their head coach. Great defense over there. So this is not going to be an easy first 3 games. If the Bengals can at least go 2-1, that would be a really good sign that things are on the up. It's harder in the middle of their schedule. They have Denver, Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago. And of course, they're in a very hard division. They have Buffalo later in their schedule too. 9.5 is their win total. I think that's exactly where it should be. I lean to the over because I trust in Burrow. This is too many seasons on end where they've started really slowly. I think they'll have a better start this season. If you think I'm going to pick the Bengals early in Survivor, though, it's not going to happen. But that being said, I lean to their over. I give them an 81 in my power ratings. They would be about a 74, maybe a 73 if they didn't have Joe Burrow. Just goes to show you how much he adds to that team. Like, he should be the MVP here soon. He definitely had the numbers last season, but they just didn't have the wins. They didn't have the success as a team to go along with it. But this is a team that could very quickly go up or down in my power ratings based on how they perform early and how just in sync they are as a team. Are there symbiotic relationships between the coaches and the players? Is it all working? Are you seeing the chemistry on the field? And is everybody on the same page? I hope so. Love the Bengals just as like a fan. Love Joe Burrow. But they still have a ways to prove on defense, and they got to get off to a better start. All right, next up is those Cleveland Browns that they face in week 1.